Welcome back to Townsquare Sunday. I'm Jim Phillips. My next guest is someone whose organization has committed to ending racism and empowering women. Gail Fortes is director of YWCA Southcoast. Welcome, Gail.
Thank you, Jim, for having me on the show today. I appreciate it.
Gail, tell us something about your relationship with the YW. How long have you been there, the executive director? What brought you there?
Sure. I've been the executive director now for 10 years, going on 11 years, but I actually started at the YWCA in 1994, fresh out of college as a graduate of Bridgewater State University. So it was actually my first and only job is at the YWCA. So people joke I started as a baby and I've literally grown up at the YWCA.
I hear you. They used to say the same thing about me, but now I'm so old that they don't say that anymore. What is the YW doing to end racism? A serious discussion here about about a problem that just doesn't seem to go away. Now, I think most people would agree. I don't want to use that old cliche. Well, things are better. They're relatively better, but there's overt racism, and then there's something else.
Yes,
that kind of creeps through.
Absolutely.
So your organization, I'm sure, are familiar with all of that, and you've heard all of it. What are you doing to kind of combat this stuff?
We have several programs right now that we're running for this issue. Unfortunately, like you said, this is something we're still working on. A lot of it is subtle. A lot of it is insinuation, and sometimes people don't even realize that, these different things are happening. So for the past year, we've really been focusing on doing issues related to cultural competency, racial justice work, and white privilege work, and just really having a common language and a common understanding of the issues. I mean, we are fortunate in our community. There's not too many overt things that happen on a daily basis like we've been seeing, on the news throughout the nation. But there are things that happen. We've been doing work with the public schools, both New Bedford Public Schools and with Greater New Bedford Vocational School, working with teachers, working with paraprofessionals, working with staff. We want to be working with students, hopefully, in the next year. We have a youth council that does this work, and we work with our children from the little ones on up and starting just having conversations and discussions. So we've been working a lot on that, and we're getting ready to start a new program that was funded by the United Way South End Engage, which is Youth Police Dialogue. So we'll be starting that next month, which really focuses on this issue, and because a lot of it is institutional and been happening, so that we can have more conversations about that.
A couple of questions there. 2 or 3 years ago, there was great concern at Vocational High School by students.
Yes.
That people were not listening, that there was a level of discrimination that involved teachers and students, and I'm sure those students felt there was a culture there that put up with that, that allowed it to continue. How do you break down a barrier like that?
Again, it's having conversations, multiple conversations. It's not a one-time fix. It's not a one-time you go to a workshop or a training and all of a sudden the issue is fixed. It's a community issue, and it's everyone. So we started working with the administrators. Under the former superintendent, Linda Enos, brought us in, and we attended many, many sessions. We're working with the current administration as well, and we just finished professional development with the teachers before school wrapped up, and going back in again when school starts, working with students. They have a diversity council now, so it's an ongoing process. It's going to take a long time to work through, some of the challenges faced at the school, but it's constant conversation.
Chief Cordero, when he was on this program a number of weeks ago, talked about the South End conversations that himself and I guess you have forged ahead with or about to forge ahead. Will they start in September?
They're actually going to start in July.
Okay.
At Denison Memorial is our first one. We're actually just finishing facilitator training this week, and we're working on recruiting youth. The chief has been very open to being able to do this right away. He said, absolutely, we want to work on this issue. And, we're not just going to do it in the South End. This is like the first round, but both of us have the same goal, is to have it citywide, working in the West End and working in the North End. So we're accessing other funding to be able to do that as well. But we're really excited. We have 7 facilitators that will be finished training tomorrow. And we'll be ready to start in July at Denison, and then we'll continue to do several throughout the fall.
What do you hope to, obviously you want to ease tensions between police and young people. I'm sure that's the number
Yes,
one goal.
that's the number one goal. Build trust, build community.
And but again, it's not going to happen overnight. I think it's like Poke Tech. This is going to take a while too.
Exactly. I think it's ongoing conversations, having, the police officers, really hear and listen to what the youth are saying, and have the youth listen to what the police are saying, because we know that, our police department works really hard. It's not an easy job, and there's a lot of misconceptions. There's a lot of stereotypes as well, and there's a lot of, misinformation out there. So I think having, 6-week session where you're having the same youth and the same police officers really getting to know each other, really getting to talk, will be great. And then the more that we can do, my goal, love to have every police officer in the city participate at some point. So this is a long-term plan, and have as many youth as possible participate.
Okay, so Denison would be one spot, then you'll move to
We'll
another
be moving
location.
around the city. We've been, cultivating partners. Immigrant Assistance Centers will be one of them, North Star Learning Centers, and I have several in mind that I want to approach. Those have already been approached and are willing to participate, but I have several others throughout the West End and South End that we want to work with to do this.
Another goal you've stated on your website is empowering women. What's the plan there? How, it's in your organization's name, YWCA. How do we go about that?
Again, it's a long-term goal. A lot of people have misconceptions, again, that think that, women are empowered, women are running organizations, Fortune 500 companies, but there's still disparities in, the number of women in those leadership roles, what they're getting paid. Many times it's less than what men are getting paid, and there's still, unequal disparity in those issues. So until women, have all the opportunities that men have, and a lot of times, white women have different advantages over what women of color have. They're making more than, even though they're making less than men, but they're making more than, say, a Latino woman or an Asian woman in similar positions. So again, it's getting the word out, informing women, and partnering with men too as well, because males have mothers, sisters, wives, daughters too. We need everyone's help to advocate for all of these issues.
There have been stories recently I've heard of over the air of situations where companies, it's kind of unsaid, where companies will shy away from making a woman, appointing her to a leadership position because she's of childbearing age.
Exactly.
And they don't want to deal with that whole thing.
Right.
And that's wrong.
It is wrong, and it does happen. And, even though, again, it's not said, but those are the things that women miss opportunities to be promoted, or because, you have to run out because your child is sick, or you have to pick them up. And there's penalties for that, even though, again, it's not overt, but those things, do happen.
We're listening to Townsquare Sunday. My guest is Gail Fortes of the YWCA Southcoast. We are going to talk now about the Under One Roof project. Of all the projects the YW was involved in, to me, this is pretty impressive. You received $1.8 million from the state legislature to add on to your building, in essence.
Yes.
First of all, how did you convince the legislature to spend that money on this project in New Bedford? That's a story in itself. You may be able to do a book on that.
I probably could. I always say at the end of this project, I definitely could do that. It's a long process. It takes a lot of patience, a lot of persistence, and just being true to our mission and true to what we're doing, and making the case of why this is important. We're in an old historic building. And this started over 10 years ago, actually, of how we're going to make this building accessible to people with disabilities. That's how this project originally started, because we didn't want to move. We wanted to stay downtown as a community organization. We felt that was important. But we had a million sites that we're doing programming in, which is still okay, and we still plan to do that. But we needed a home for some of our bigger programs. And luckily, we were able to find... in the past, there had been a carriage house on this historic home, which is the Levi Standish house, which is a descendant of Miles Standish. So we could put an addition on to the building, because you have to go through Mass Historic. There's, so many other details that you have to go through. So applying for funding, working with, Senator Mark Montigny and Representative Antonio Cabral and Mayor John Mitchell and Mayor Ling before him. I can't even say how important it was to have their support, their advocacy, and their help. Our board of directors and our volunteers are just amazing. They never gave up. They are persistent as well, because it's one thing when I do this, because technically it is my job, even though I love it and have a great passion for it, but having all of these people making phone calls, writing letters, going with me to the State House, to make those visits and explain why this is so important. And we've been very fortunate to work with a great consultant, the Women's Institute for Housing and Economic Development, that's worked on several other projects in the city. And Pat Sullivan's office here, too, as well as the Community Development Office, have been very, very supportive. So it's a long process. It's not an easy process at all, but one of the best days ever was to get that phone call, and it was the Lieutenant Governor herself who called me on my cell phone. And I'm thinking, whose number is this, and why are they calling me? And at first, I just couldn't believe when she said that, because I had met her about a month prior to that at another event, and she said, I wanted to give you the news myself that we are receiving the money from the legislators. So it was a lot of long wishes that finally, came true at the right time. I think everything came together.
And this wasn't the first year you've worked on this, obviously.
No. We've been working, like I said, 10 years back with the feasibility study and what are we going to do, and going through different renditions, more than one architect, more than one consultant, fundraising, committees, and we applied, for several grants. We're denied twice, so I think maybe third time's the charm, as well. But having, a good case to have a program that's going to help low-income women with housing and children, school-age children with after-school programming, again, I think it's an easy sell. Yeah. It's really, really important. So we're really excited.
As you mentioned, when you first talked about this, was making the building accessible for folks with disabilities. But now it's a little bit more than that.
It became a little bit more than that. So we still will be accessible because it'll have a connecting bridge. So that solved that first issue of making the disability without doing a big staircase around the building. We wanted it to look like it still belonged, with a historic home. So that was challenging, absolutely. Learned a lot through this process, things I didn't even know, existed, of how to really do this and make it fit in with Mass Historic's regulations. But at the same time, we were leasing space and spending quite a bit of money on property that was not our own. And either the landlord wasn't going to sell it, or, we just couldn't stay there because of our licensing, and we wanted to grow. So it's, how do we make a permanent home? And said, let's see if we can do this. So we'll be doing some work in our current building, because now we're no longer going to be grandfathered in with some of the things. But I think that'll be a great thing to be able to do, to have sprinklers and some of the other things we need to do. We'll be using our lower level of our building, which is now, put everything in the basement as everybody else does, for classroom space for youth. And we'll have the addition also have more classroom space for youth, as well as residential for women.
And this is going to be a housing situation. You're
housing
situation.
Provide
housing to women with children who may need
just women only, actually, because that's a need. There are many women that may have children, or their children might be living with foster parents, grandparents, or they have adult children, but they're still low income and they cannot get services because their children are not living with them. And that's the reason that we started doing programming just for low income women that are single. They have their own room, and it's fully furnished, and they share the common living areas, the kitchen, bathroom facilities, and living facilities. They are all either working or going to school. And we require that they stay with us for at least 3 months. But we have one that's been with us for 7 years right now, in another program that we continue to operate, and we'll still continue to have, even though we're opening another program for 8 new women.
So
to
this will be for eight slots.
8 slots, for women to come in, and those supportive services with that as well.
What's the estimated time for completion of this project?
Well, right now we are finishing. We're about 99% done with the construction documents. They've been submitted to Mass Historic Commission for approval, and then they'll be going to the City of New Bedford. Once that's done, we hope to be able to go out to bid I'm hoping in a month or two, the most. I don't know how long that takes. They said it takes a couple of weeks to get everything back from the city, so we're hoping to actually pick a contractor. Being optimistic that by the end of August, early September, we'll be able to actually get all of that done and start by October and be moved in within the next 12 to 18 months.
within the next the project will take a year to construct it?
It takes about a year, is what the architect
Okay,
said,
so-
depending on the weather and other factors.
Yeah,
but we want to
so-
start by October. That's the goal,
A
is
year
to
from
start by
October,
October.
you're going to cut a ribbon there.
Cut a ribbon and open the doors. But we do want to have a groundbreaking to recognize again all of the people, board members that have come and gone, board chairs that have come and gone, that have really helped work on this project and spearhead it, to invite them in and to celebrate with us.
Why did the Y feel that this project was the way to go? Because you've got these broad projects, fight racism and empower women. Those are kind of broad
Right,
things.
absolutely.
This is a little more specific.
This is definitely specific. We, again, were looking for originally to move. We were looking for space. And downtown at the time when we were looking, if you remember, the old building that we used to be in, which is now Nativity Prep, and we moved to the Standish House, which we own, and that was supposed to be temporary while we were building another building or looking for another home, and we just couldn't find anything that, suited our needs. And it was like, okay, we want to stay downtown, which was important, but we needed a bigger space than was available at that time. Mm-hmm. So that's why the board at the time made the decision to be able to do this. That way we'd have a permanent home, as well as a home that could be changed, because as one of the board chairs quoted, 100 years from now, we want this building to be here when all of us are gone. So we really need to be intentional. We need to be consistent and persistent with what we want, and because this will be the legacy. And that way, whoever's here at the YWCA table, if housing is no longer an issue, we could change it to something else, or childcare. It's easily transferable space, but we definitely wanted space that we owned. That was really important to have ownership, because spending money year after year on leases was starting to be cost prohibitive.
Sure. Well, you've got a building.
We have a building finally, yay!
And you have a place and programs and goals, and we wish you well.
Oh, thank
Gail
you.
Fortes, thanks for coming in today.
I appreciate it.
And
Thanks for having
talking
us.
about the YWCA Southcoast. Good luck with your project under one roof.
Okay, thank you.